My foster parents kicked me out onto the streets and called it a favor. Now, 15 years later, they're back, expecting I give back to the people who raised me. I woke up to my things packed and my foster dad's boot kicking me outdoors. You're a failure. But if you make us proud, we'll come back one day. This is a favor for you. They didn't even let me eat breakfast or take the pictures of my dead parents off my nightstand. The first week sleeping behind the library taught me hunger. But something weird happened when the initial terror wore off. No more 5 a.m. wind sprints. No more being screamed at for reading instead of practicing free throws. No more pretending to care about making the NBA to be their golden ticket just because I was 6'3" at 12. Year 1 was survival mode. I forged enrollment papers for school, showered at the gym, worked nights stocking shelves. But my grades never slipped. Teachers started noticing the kid who solved calculus problems for fun, who rebuilt computers from trash. Mrs. Jones let me stay after class, not asking why I needed the extra time indoors. Year 2 brought unexpected opportunities. My physics teacher pulled strings for early college enrollment. I was taking university courses at 17, mopping floors to pay for textbooks. The campus became my universe. I slept in the 24-hour computer lab, lived on vending machine dinners, and topped every class. Year 3 changed everything. At a hackathon, I met Chris, a venture capitalist judging entries. My solution to optimize city traffic flow won, but he was more interested in how I'd built it on borrowed laptops. When he learned I was homeless, he didn't pity me. He offered me an internship that came with a stipend, and more importantly, a couch in the startup's office. The startup was failing when I joined. Within 6 months, my code had saved it. Chris made me CTO at 19, equity included. We sold the company 2 years later. My share was 8 figures. I remember staring at the bank balance on a library computer, the same library where I'd once been kicked out for sleeping. With money came transformation. I bought a house, nothing flashy, just mine. Enrolled at MIT, graduated summa cum laude, started my own company. But the biggest change was Fen. We met at a conference where I was speaking about ethical AI. She was brilliant, kind, and when I finally told her about my past, she held my hand and said, "You built yourself. That's extraordinary." Year 8 brought marriage in our backyard. No family on my side, but her parents had adopted me wholesale. Her father called me son. Her mother taught me to cook. We had traditions now, Sunday dinners, holiday cards, inside jokes, things foster families were supposed to give but never did. Year 10 was magical. Our daughter was born. Lucy had Fen's eyes and my stubborn streak. I held her in the hospital, promising she'd never wonder if she was wanted, never question her worth, never be someone's failed investment. Fen and I built our second company together, focusing on educational access for homeless youth. By year 15, everything had transformed. 3 kids, 2 successful exits, 1 tech empire. We lived in Silicon Valley, not for status, but for the work. My foundation had housed over 1,000 homeless teenagers, sent hundreds to college. Forbes had done a profile. Time magazine called me the conscious face of tech. I'd become everything my foster parents couldn't have imagined, because they only saw dollar signs where there was a person. Last Tuesday, everything shifted again. I was making breakfast when the doorbell rang insistently. Through the security camera, I saw them. 15 years older, same entitled faces, dragging suitcases toward our door. I opened the door before they could ring again. They pushed past me like they owned the place. Foster mom already appraising the foyer, foster dad eyeing the art. "We knew you'd make us proud eventually," foster mom said, settling onto our couch. "Though honestly, tech money? We were thinking NBA, but this works. We'll need the guest house. Can't expect us to keep living in that tiny place after raising you." Fen walked downstairs with Lucy on her hip, the twins trailing behind. She stopped, confused by the strangers making themselves at home. "Who are these people?" she asked me. "The ones who raised him," foster dad announced. "His parents. We're moving in." Lucy looked at them, then at me. "Daddy, why is that man lying? Grandma and Grandpa live in Boston." The twins stared at the strangers. "Are you Daddy's work people?" one asked politely. Foster mom's face went pale. "We're his family. We raised him, fed him, put a roof over his head. For 3 years," I said calmly, "until I stopped being useful. Then you threw me onto the streets at 15. In case you forgot, I have the police report from when you reported me as a runaway to avoid abandonment charges." "That was tough love," foster dad sputtered. "Look what you became because of it." "I became this despite you," I replied. "Fen, these are the people who kicked me out for wanting to study instead of play basketball. Kids, these are strangers who think they're owed something. They're leaving now." Foster mom stood up, frantic. "We're your parents. You owe us. I owe you exactly what you gave me after throwing me out. Nothing." I pulled out my phone. "Security will escort you out." "Well, I'm not leaving." Foster mom crossed her arms and planted herself deeper into our couch cushions while I pressed the emergency button on my phone app. The security company had installed it after a break-in attempt 2 years ago and promised 3-minute response time. Foster dad moved to block the hallway like he was defending a basketball court. My hands stayed steady, but I could feel the old fear creeping up my spine. 2 security guards arrived in under 3 minutes and knocked firmly on our door. I let them in and pointed to my foster parents, who were now both standing but refusing to move toward the exit. The lead guard, a tall woman with military posture, approached them calmly and explained they needed to leave the property immediately. Foster mom grabbed the back of a chair while foster dad started shouting about parental rights and how they raised me for years. The guard stayed professional but moved closer, and the woman guard told them this was their last warning before police involvement. Foster dad's face turned red as he yelled louder about lawyers and going to the media with their story. Foster mom tried to wrap her arms around our coffee table, but the guards gently but firmly pulled her hands away. They escorted both of them toward the door, while threats and accusations flew from their mouths. I watched them being walked out, and my hands started shaking as I turned the deadbolt behind them. Fen had already taken Lucy upstairs along with the twins before things got too heated. Through our front window, I watched my foster parents walk to the sidewalk outside our gate, where they stopped and started yelling at neighbors walking by. Foster mom pulled cardboard and markers from her bag and started making signs while foster dad paced back and forth. Within 10 minutes, they had signs saying things about grandparents' rights and being kept from their grandchildren. Our neighbor across the street came out to see what the noise was about, and foster mom immediately started telling her sob story. I pulled out my phone and called the non-emergency police line to report the trespassing and get advice. The dispatcher took my information and said an officer would arrive within the hour to take a statement. Fen came back downstairs after settling the kids with a movie in the playroom. We watched through the window as more neighbors gathered to see the show my foster parents were creating. The police officer arrived 40 minutes later, and I met him at the gate to explain the situation. He took notes while I described the abandonment 15 years ago and showed him the old police report on my phone. The officer explained that getting a restraining order would require documentation of ongoing harassment and suggested I start keeping records of everything. He went outside to speak with my foster parents, who immediately started their victim routine. After 20 minutes, he came back and told me they'd been warned about trespassing, but couldn't be forced to leave the public sidewalk. He gave me a case number and said to call if they came onto our property again. Once the officer left, I went to my home office and shut the door. The room felt too quiet, and for just a moment I was 15 again, scared and alone. My chest got tight, and I had to remind myself where I was now. I looked at the photos on my desk of Fen and the kids, and took deep breaths. This wasn't then, and I wasn't that powerless kid anymore. I had resources and lawyers and security systems. Most importantly, I had a real family to protect now. That evening, after dinner and baths and 3 bedtime stories, Fen and I sat in our bedroom to figure out next steps. We could still hear occasional shouting from the street even though it was past 9. Fen held my hand while we talked through options and agreed that complete no contact was the only safe choice. These people had thrown me away when I needed them most, and now wanted to profit from my success. We couldn't let them near our children who didn't deserve to be pawns in their money grab. The next morning, I woke up early and checked our security system on my laptop. The footage showed something that made my stomach drop. My foster parents had been filmed walking past our house multiple times over the past 4 days. They'd been watching us and planning this ambush. I called the security company immediately to upgrade our system with more cameras and motion sensors. Then I printed screenshots of my foster parents from the footage and drove to the kids' school. The principal met with me right away when I explained the situation, and we added their photos to the no-access list. School security would have their pictures and strict instructions to call police if they appeared on campus. When I got home, Lucy was eating breakfast and asked why those people had been yelling yesterday. I sat down with her and the twins to explain in simple terms about stranger safety. I told them that sometimes people might say they're family when they're not. The twins nodded seriously while Lucy asked if the angry people would come back. I promised we would keep them safe and reminded them to always tell a teacher or us if anyone made them feel scared. That evening, after the kids were playing with blocks, I called Chris, who'd been more of a father to me than anyone. He listened while I explained everything that had happened since yesterday morning. His voice was calm and steady as he validated every decision I'd made so far. He suggested documenting everything with timestamps and saving all footage in case this escalated legally. Before we hung up, he reminded me that real family is chosen, and I'd chosen well. The next morning, my phone rang during my first coffee, and my foundation's head of operations sounded worried. She'd been monitoring our social media mentions as part of standard practice and noticed unusual activity. Apparently, my foster parents had started posting their version of events on Facebook and Twitter. They were claiming I'd abandoned them after they sacrificed everything to raise me. I scrolled through the comments on my phone while Fen made the kids lunch and saw the damage spreading in real time. Aaron Stratton picked up on the second ring when I called him, since we'd worked together on crisis management for 3 years now. He drove over within an hour and sat at our kitchen table reviewing the posts while the kids played in the backyard. His fingers moved fast across his tablet as he tracked the spread across different platforms and flagged the worst comments for documentation. He pulled up a document template he'd used for other clients and started typing out a factual statement about my history with dates and police report numbers. We wouldn't release it unless major outlets picked up the story, but having it ready made me feel less helpless, watching the lies spread online. Fen joined us after putting the twins down for their nap, and we talked through our options while Aaron took notes on his laptop. She suggested we needed more than just PR help, since this was becoming a legal issue with them coming to our property and spreading false information. I called 3 law firms that afternoon and got recommendations from board members who dealt with similar situations in their own lives. The lawyer Chris recommended called back within an hour and agreed to meet us the next morning at her downtown office. That night I barely slept and kept checking the security cameras every hour to make sure they weren't back on our property. The lawyer's office was on the 20th floor with a view of the whole bay and certificates covering one entire wall. She listened while I explained everything from the abandonment at 15 to their appearance at our door yesterday morning. Her assistant took notes while she asked specific questions about dates and documentation I still had from being kicked out. She pulled up similar cases on her computer and showed us the legal precedents for restraining orders in situations like ours. The evidence requirements were clear, and we had most of what we needed already between the security footage and their social media posts. She drafted the cease and desist letter right there in the meeting and had it ready for delivery within 2 hours. The process server found them at a motel 6 miles from our house where they'd been staying for the past week. He handed them the envelope and took a photo for proof of delivery while they yelled at him about their rights. The letter spelled out in clear legal terms that they had to stop all contact attempts and remove the false posts immediately. Instead of complying, foster mom took a photo of the letter and posted it online within an hour of receiving it. Her caption claimed I was using expensive lawyers to silence my own parents, who just wanted to reconnect with family. The comment section turned into a war zone with people arguing about whether abandoning a teenager gave up parental rights forever. Some shared their own stories of toxic parents, while others said family should always forgive each other no matter what. Our neighbor across the street texted me asking if everything was okay, since he'd seen the protests and police visits. I walked over to explain the basic situation, without going into all the painful details of my childhood. He was supportive, but mentioned other neighbors were getting nervous about all the drama on our usually quiet street. The mom from 2 houses down stopped by later to ask if we needed anything, but I could tell she was worried. More neighbors started texting and calling throughout the day with questions and concerns about what was happening. I spent hours on the phone with the security company, upgrading our system to include more cameras and sensors. They sent a team out that afternoon to install everything and walked me through the new app features. We hired rotating guards to patrol the property in 8-hour shifts, starting immediately at $500 per shift. The expense was massive, but knowing someone was watching while we slept made it possible to actually rest. My first therapy appointment was 3 days later with someone who specialized in childhood trauma and family boundaries. She had me start from the beginning and tell her about the morning they kicked me out with nothing. I talked for the full hour about sleeping behind the library and forging school enrollment papers to stay in classes. She helped me see that setting boundaries wasn't about punishing them, but protecting the family I'd built. The foundation's biggest donor called my personal cell the next morning, saying he'd seen the online controversy. He wanted to understand the situation before the quarterly board meeting, since other donors were asking questions too. I scheduled an emergency board meeting for that Friday and prepared a presentation with all the documentation of my past. The conference room was full when I walked in with board members who'd flown in from across the country. I laid out everything from the police report when I was 15 to the current harassment with complete transparency. Several board members shared their own experiences with family members who'd appeared when money was involved. They voted unanimously to support me and drafted a statement backing my decisions if the media coverage expanded. The police liaison assigned to our case came to the house that afternoon with paperwork for the restraining order filing. She'd handled dozens of these cases where estranged relatives showed up after someone became successful. She walked us through each form and explained what evidence would be most compelling to a judge. Her calm professionalism made the whole process feel less overwhelming, even though my hands shook signing each document. The next morning, my phone rang during breakfast, and the school's number made my stomach drop. The secretary said my foster parents had been spotted outside during morning drop-off, trying to take pictures through the fence. Security had moved them along, but they'd been asking other parents which kids belonged to me. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the school while Fen called our lawyer. The principal was waiting in her office with the head of security when I arrived. They'd already pulled the security footage showing foster mom holding up her phone toward the playground. The principal said they took this very seriously and wanted to work out a safety plan immediately. We spent 2 hours going through pickup procedures and creating a list of approved adults. The school would add extra security during arrival and dismissal times starting tomorrow. They'd also brief all staff about the situation without going into personal details. I gave them photos of my foster parents to post at the main office and security booth. The principal assured me they'd handled similar situations before with custody disputes. On the drive home, our lawyer called with an update on the restraining order filing. She suggested we try mediation before the court hearing since judges liked seeing attempted resolution. I told her absolutely not, but she explained it would be done safely with security present. She said refusing mediation might make us look unreasonable to the judge. I agreed to think about it, but the idea of sitting across from them made me sick. Fen was on the phone when I got home, and I heard her say Dad's name. Her parents were booking flights from Boston to come help with the kids. They'd arrive tomorrow afternoon and stay as long as we needed them. That evening, Fen's dad called me directly to check in. He said he was proud of how I was handling everything, and that I was the son he'd always wanted. His words hit me harder than I expected, and I had to sit down after we hung up. Friday morning, I forced myself to tackle the painful task of gathering evidence. I pulled out the old file box from the closet where I kept documents from my homeless years. The police report from when they kicked me out was on top, yellowed and creased from being folded so many times. Next came the school attendance records showing I'd missed weeks while living on the streets. There were photos from the shelter's security camera showing me sleeping on a cot. Each paper brought back memories of hunger and cold and fear. My hands shook as I scanned everything into digital files for our lawyer. Fen found me surrounded by papers and sat down beside me without saying anything. After I finished scanning, we talked about whether to go public with the whole story. The online chatter was getting louder and more people were asking questions. We decided to prepare a full statement with all the facts but keep it ready without posting yet. Maybe the situation would calm down without needing to share such personal details. Saturday brought Fen's parents and the house felt safer with them there. Her mom took over cooking and homework help, while her dad installed new locks on all the gates. Sunday, our lawyer emailed that the court had scheduled our restraining order hearing for Thursday. But there was a complication because my foster parents had hired their own lawyer. They were claiming grandparent rights even though they'd never met our kids before last week. Their lawyer had filed a counter motion arguing they deserved visitation as the people who raised me. Monday morning, I met with Aaron at his office to work on a public statement. He'd drafted something focused on family safety without attacking anyone directly. We spent 3 hours getting the wording exactly right to avoid legal problems. The statement was ready to release, but we hoped we wouldn't need it. Aaron set up Google Alerts to monitor any media coverage, so we'd know immediately if things escalated. Tuesday, my phone started blowing up with texts from friends sending me a link. A gossip blog had picked up the story with a headline about tech billionaire abandoning parents who saved him. The article was full of quotes from my foster parents about raising me and sacrificing everything. The comments section was brutal, with people calling me ungrateful and heartless. Within hours, the story had been shared thousands of times across social media. People who didn't know anything about the situation were picking sides and arguing in the comments. Some defended me, saying there must be more to the story, but others said money had made me forget my roots. Aaron called an emergency meeting and said we needed to release our statement immediately. We posted it on my company's blog, along with the scanned police report from when I was 15. The statement included documentation showing they'd reported me as a runaway to avoid abandonment charges. We also shared the school records proving I'd been homeless while they lived in their house. The truth spread almost as fast as the lies had, and public opinion started shifting. People read the police report and saw the dates and realized these weren't loving parents. Comments started pouring in from others who'd been kicked out by family or foster parents. Some journalists reached out wanting to do follow-up stories, but we declined all interviews. By Wednesday morning, 3 major news outlets had picked up the story with more balanced coverage. Thursday afternoon, Lucy came home from the school with her backpack dragging on the ground and went straight to her room without saying hello. Fen found her crying into her pillow 20 minutes later, and Lucy finally told us that kids at the school kept asking if her dad was the one who abandoned his poor parents, and now they were homeless because of us. The twins had been getting similar questions, but didn't understand what was happening, and just told everyone their grandparents lived in Boston, which confused their classmates even more. I sat on Lucy's bed and held her while she sobbed and asked why people were being so mean when we didn't do anything wrong. That night, after the kids were asleep, Fen and I stayed up planning how to help them handle this mess that my past had created. Friday morning, we had a family meeting at the breakfast table where I explained in simple terms that sometimes adults disagree about things, and people who don't know the whole story might say hurtful things. Lucy asked if the people who showed up were really my parents, and I told her they took care of me for a little while when I was young, but they weren't safe people, which is why we have our real family now with Grandma and Grandpa in Boston. The twins wanted to know if the angry people would come back, and Fen promised them we had people making sure they stayed away. We practiced what to say if anyone asked questions at the school, which was just that it was a private family matter, and they could talk to their teacher if someone was bothering them. I called the school principal that afternoon, and she assured me they were monitoring the situation and would shut down any harassment immediately. Saturday brought some relief when our lawyer called to say the judge had reviewed our emergency petition and granted a temporary restraining order that required my foster parents to stay at least 500 feet away from us and cease all contact attempts. The order covered our home, the kids' school, my office, and Fen's workplace, and would be in effect for 3 weeks until the full hearing. I knew it was just a piece of paper that wouldn't physically stop them if they decided to violate it, but at least now there would be legal consequences if they tried anything. Sunday was quiet, and we tried to have a normal family day at the park, but I kept scanning the area for their faces and jumping whenever someone approached us. Monday morning, our lawyer called again, but this time his voice was tight with frustration as he explained that a handwritten letter had arrived at his office from foster mom, demanding compensation for the years they spent raising me. She'd itemized everything from food costs to clothes to the gas they used driving me to the school, and calculated that I owed them $300,000 for their investment in my upbringing. The letter went on to say that since I'd become successful because of the foundation they provided, they deserved ongoing financial support and a percentage of my company's profits. The entitlement was so absurd I actually laughed, but the lawyer warned me they might try to sue even though they had no legal grounds. Tuesday, he called back with a proposal that made my stomach turn, but might end this whole nightmare peacefully. He suggested we offer them limited assistance through a third-party organization, basically helping them find housing and job training, but with no direct money changing hands and everything contingent on them signing a permanent no-contact agreement. It felt like paying them off, which went against everything in me. But he pointed out that defending against frivolous lawsuits would cost more in the long run, and this way we could control the terms completely. I told him I needed to think about it and talk to my therapist before making any decisions. Wednesday's therapy session was one of the hardest I'd had since starting after they first showed up at our door. I sat on the couch explaining how offering them any help at all felt like betraying my younger self, who they'd thrown away like garbage, but also how part of me just wanted this to end, so my family could have peace. My therapist helped me see that acting from my own values of helping people in need didn't mean I was agreeing with their claims or validating their treatment of me. She pointed out that I could choose to help them get stable, not because I owed them anything, but because it aligned with who I'd chosen to become despite them. By the end of the session, I'd worked through enough of the anger to see that structured assistance with strict boundaries might be the best path forward for everyone. Thursday, Fen and I met with our lawyer to outline exactly what we were willing to offer and under what conditions. We'd provide assistance through a nonprofit that specialized in housing placement and job training with a maximum budget of $50,000 for moving expenses and 6 months of transitional support. There would be absolutely no direct contact or cash payments, and they would have to sign a legally binding agreement to never contact us or our children again, with violations resulting in immediate termination of all assistance and potential criminal charges. The lawyer drafted the offer that afternoon and said he'd present it to their attorney with the strong recommendation that they accept, since it was more than they'd get in court. Friday, their lawyer responded saying they wanted to discuss the terms in mediation rather than accepting outright, which meant I'd have to be in the same room with them again. The mediation got scheduled for the following Wednesday at a neutral conference room downtown with professional mediators and security present, just in case things got heated. I spent the weekend dreading it, and barely slept Tuesday night thinking about facing them across a table. Wednesday morning, I put on my best suit like armor and drove to the mediation with our lawyer while Fen stayed home with the kids. The conference room was sterile and cold with a long table and uncomfortable chairs, and my foster parents were already there when we arrived, looking older and more worn down than when they'd shown up at our house. The mediator explained the ground rules about respectful communication and staying focused on resolution, but within 5 minutes, foster mom was demanding cash payments and ongoing monthly support. She kept saying I wouldn't be where I was without them, and that successful children take care of their parents, and this was just how families worked. Foster dad sat quietly beside her, looking tired and defeated, while she ranted about everything they'd sacrificed to raise me. When the mediator explained our offer of structured assistance through a nonprofit, foster mom's face turned red, and she started yelling that she didn't need job training at her age and deserved real money, not charity handouts. The mediator called for a 15-minute break when foster mom started crying and saying we were trying to control them and treat them like children when all they wanted was what any parent deserved from a successful child. During the break, I stood in the hallway trying to breathe normally, while my lawyer reminded me we didn't have to accept any terms we weren't comfortable with. When we returned, foster mom had a new demand that made my hands clench into fists as she insisted on visitation rights with her grandchildren as part of any agreement. She said it wasn't fair to keep them from family and that the kids deserved to know where their father came from. I told her they would never go near my children, and she started screaming that I was ungrateful and cruel and had forgotten everything they'd done for me. Foster dad finally spoke up and told her to stop and pulled her aside to the corner where they argued in harsh whispers while the mediator suggested we take another break. I could hear foster dad saying something about being realistic and taking what was offered while foster mom kept insisting they deserved more after everything they'd been through. The mediator finally called us back in, and foster mom had clearly been crying while foster dad looked even more tired than before. She demanded $50,000 cash right now, or she'd go to every news outlet that would listen and tell them how I abandoned the people who saved me from the streets. My lawyer started to respond, but I held up my hand and looked directly at them both. I told them the offer stood as presented, but there would be no cash and no contact with my children ever. Foster mom slammed her hand on the table and stormed out, while foster dad sat there for another moment before following her. The mediator noted everything for the record and said she'd be in touch if they changed their minds. That night at dinner, I told Fen about the foundation's big fundraising gala coming up next week and how worried I was they might try to cause problems. She suggested we hire extra security just for the event, and I agreed, even though it felt crazy to need bodyguards at a charity dinner. I called our security company the next morning, and they sent over their event specialist who walked through the whole venue with me that afternoon. He pointed out weak spots in the layout and suggested posting guards at every entrance plus having plainclothes officers mixed in with the guests. The security team came to our house 3 days before the gala to go over protocols with our whole family. They taught the kids a special code word that meant they needed to leave immediately and showed Fen and me the safe routes out of the building. Lucy asked why we needed escape plans for Daddy's work party, and I told her it was just being extra careful. The twins practiced the code word game and thought it was fun, but I felt sick planning exit strategies from my own charity event. The night of the gala, I put on my tux while checking my phone constantly for security updates. Fen looked beautiful in her dress, and the kids were staying with her parents for the night, which made me feel better about their safety. We arrived at the venue early to check everything, and sure enough, the security chief pulled me aside 20 minutes before guests arrived. He showed me his phone where there was a photo of my foster parents across the street with handmade signs. The signs said things about ungrateful children and abandonment, and they were trying to talk to anyone who would listen. Security had already called the police, who were keeping them on the opposite sidewalk, but I could see them through the window when I gave my speech. I talked about homeless youth and second chances while watching foster mom wave her sign at passing cars. The crowd gave me a standing ovation, but all I could think about was them outside trying to ruin everything we'd built. After everyone left and we got home, I couldn't stop shaking. Fen found me sitting on the bathroom floor at 3 in the morning, having my first real panic attack in years. My chest felt crushed, and I couldn't breathe right, and she held me while I tried to remember the breathing exercises from therapy. She counted with me and rubbed my back until my heart stopped racing and I could think clearly again. The next morning, I called my therapist for an emergency session and spent an hour working through what had happened. 2 weeks later, we were back in court for the restraining order hearing. The judge reviewed all our evidence, including the security footage from the gala and photos of them violating the temporary order multiple times. Foster mom's lawyer argued they were just trying to reconnect with family and meant no harm, but the judge wasn't buying it. She extended the restraining order for 3 full years and warned them that any violation would result in jail time. Foster mom started yelling in the courtroom about her rights, and the bailiff had to escort them out while the judge banged her gavel. Our lawyer said it was one of the strongest restraining orders she'd seen granted. The following week, I had to present everything to our foundation's board of directors. I brought all the documentation and explained the whole situation, including the security measures we'd implemented. One board member asked if this might hurt our reputation, and I said I'd understand if they wanted me to step back. Instead, they voted unanimously to support me, and 3 members stayed after to share their own stories about toxic family. One woman told me about her brother who'd shown up demanding money after her company went public. Another man talked about parents who'd disowned him for being gay, but wanted back in when he got rich. A week after that, our mediator called with surprising news. Foster dad had contacted her separately, saying he was willing to accept our assistance package without foster mom. He'd sign the no-contact agreement and accept help getting job training and temporary housing if we'd help him get away from her. I talked it over with Fen, and we agreed to help him even though part of me wanted to say no. The mediator set up the paperwork, and foster dad signed everything the next day. Foster mom found out immediately and went on a social media rampage. She posted constantly calling foster dad weak and pathetic for taking our charity and calling me manipulative for turning him against her. But people were losing interest in her drama, and her posts got fewer likes and comments each day. She kept demanding cash and refusing any structured help while living in that same motel. Meanwhile, the school principal called to say there hadn't been any incidents in weeks. The extra security measures were working, and our kids were doing much better without the constant worry. Lucy told me one night that she felt safe again and wasn't scared of the angry people anymore. The twins had stopped asking questions and went back to just being normal kids worried about normal kid stuff. On Saturday morning, I asked Lucy if she wanted to go on a special trip with me. We drove to the old part of town, and I parked outside the library where I used to sleep behind the dumpsters. I showed her the spot without making it dramatic and explained this was where I lived when I was a teenager. She held my hand tight and looked up at me with those big eyes that looked just like her mom's. She said she was proud of me for being strong and making a good life for our family. The next Monday, I met with Chris at his office downtown, and he leaned back in his chair while I told him about the whole mess. He nodded and said boundaries aren't walls but bridges to better relationships, and I'd done everything right to protect my family. That afternoon, the bills came in from the lawyers and security company, over $40,000 total, but I wrote the checks without thinking twice about it. This was the price of keeping my family safe, and I'd pay it again tomorrow if I had to. Wednesday morning in therapy, I sat on that familiar couch and finally said out loud that I'd never have a real relationship with my foster parents, and that was okay. My therapist asked if I felt guilty, and I shook my head because I could have compassion for their problems while still keeping them away from my kids. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter to my foster parents that I'd never send. I thanked them for showing me what kind of parent I never wanted to be and told them I forgave them for my own peace. I folded it up and put it in my filing cabinet and felt something heavy lift off my chest. The next morning at the foundation office, we had a board meeting about updating our policies. I proposed new rules to protect our program kids from family members who might try to take advantage of their success. The board voted yes immediately, and within 2 weeks, other organizations were calling to copy our model. By February, 3 months after this whole thing started, life had found its rhythm again. The reporters had moved on to other stories, and we barely thought about the drama anymore. Our new security system was just part of the routine now, and the kids had stopped asking about it. Sunday dinner at Fen's parents' house was loud and happy with the twins showing off their art projects and Lucy explaining her science fair volcano. Her dad grilled steaks while her mom taught the twins to make cookies, and nobody mentioned the foster parents at all. My phone buzzed with an email from the mediator saying foster dad had finished his job training program and gotten hired at a warehouse. I deleted it without responding because that chapter was closed. Monday morning, I woke up early and made pancakes without checking the security cameras first. The doorbell rang while I was flipping them, and for the first time in months, I didn't freeze. It was just our regular grocery delivery, and I signed for it while Lucy set the table. Fen came down with the twins, and we ate breakfast together, talking about normal stuff like soccer practice and homework. Our house felt like home again instead of a fortress. The kids ran upstairs to get ready for school, and Fen kissed me before heading to her office. I loaded the dishwasher and thought about how sometimes the best thing you can do for people is close the door. My foster parents had taught me that lesson 15 years ago when they kicked me out, and now I was teaching it back to them. The difference was I'd given them chances and options and help, everything they'd never offered me. They'd chosen to refuse it all because they wanted cash, not compassion. I drove the kids to the school and watched them run inside without looking back over their shoulders anymore. The principal waved from the door and I waved back, grateful for how seriously they'd taken our safety. Back home, I had 3 meetings about the new company Fen and I were launching, something completely separate from all this family drama. Life was moving forward again, and that felt right. That afternoon, I picked up the kids and Lucy asked if we could stop for ice cream. We sat outside the shop eating our cones and she told me about her friend's birthday party next week. The twins argued about whether chocolate or vanilla was better and got ice cream on their shirts. Normal kid problems in a normal life, exactly what I'd always wanted for them. That night after the kids were asleep, Fen and I sat on the couch going through work emails. She looked up and said, our home felt peaceful again, and she was right. We'd weathered the storm and come out stronger with better boundaries and a clearer sense of what mattered. The foster parents were out there somewhere living their lives, and we were here living ours, and that separation was exactly what needed to happen. Sometimes love means holding tight, and sometimes it means letting go, and the hardest part is knowing which one to choose. I'd spent years thinking I owed them something for those 3 years they'd kept me, but I'd paid that debt 100 times over in the chances I'd offered. Now the only people I owed anything to were sleeping upstairs, the family I'd chosen and built and protected. The doorbell could ring tomorrow, and it would just be a delivery or a neighbor, not a threat or a demand or an old wound trying to bleed again. Our story would keep going forward because that's what stories do, but this chapter was done and I was okay with that. Well, that's gonna wrap it up for me today. Kinda makes you stop and think about things, huh? Appreciate you hanging out and wondering through it all with me. Subscribe for more content like this.